You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host, and today I want to dive into the whole digital corridors of the Manosphere. You might be asking, why am I doing this? Well, because I've been talking about the mental health of children and adolescents, and this is a particularly fraught little place, an echo chamber of possibly what could be the collection of all things toxic in the realm of the gender wars. And the way I want to do that is I want to identify some of its key figures and their messages and cut through some of the bullshit that some of them basically come up with in order to sell certain ideas, because there is a commercial aspect to this, folks. Let's not delude ourselves. These people are not doing it out of their goodness of their heart. They have sponsorships, they have subscribers, and they have particular business models that benefits them probably greatly. Okay, so what's their message? Well, we'll come to that. What's my message, or what's my mission? And in this particular instance, it's to critically understand and then inspire positive change rather than toxicity. So let me give you a quick introduction to the whole manosphere. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Well, the Manosphere is a loosely affiliated, primarily internet-based collection of websites, blogs, and forums that are dedicated to discussions on men's issues, masculinity, and male identity. Now, while I don't have any doubt that there's a significance to this whole area, especially in the contemporary digital culture, and also given its size and influence, I do have some very critical concerns about its content, its approach, and its impact on the whole gender discussion. So let me dig down a little bit further and let's talk about some of the sort of key players in the Manosphere. Well, obviously the first one that comes to mind is Jordan Peterson. Now, Peterson's concerns about, the limitations on free speech in many respects are probably valid. But there's critics who've pointed out that his portrayal of contemporary feminism oversimplifies the movement of feminism. And while his content is thought-provoking, a lot of the times it reinforces very traditional gender norms and a particularly sort of white, privileged male position. Now, I've got some issues with this on lots and lots of different levels. When I say that Jordan Peterson is thought-provoking, unless you're really well educated, because he certainly is, you often have difficulty discriminating rubbish from actual gems. I'm not saying he's all bad. I'm just saying that, it's shrouded in academic mystery talk and often psychobabble and sort of science mythology rather than science fact. So don't let me get any further into Jordan Peterson, because I've actually done a whole podcast on Mr. Peterson, Dr. Peterson. And let me move on to somebody else, Rush V. Now, Rush was essentially a pickup artist advocate. And he sort of transited into more and more sort of anti-feminism. And again, I have a particular problem with that approach. Now, his earlier work, fundamentally, you could recognise from objectifying women and reducing interpersonal interactions to strategies, very mechanistic and a transactional approach. Again, if you're interested, dig further, but beware, the agenda is fundamentally an us versus them approach, i.e., man the god, woman the object. I might be a bit harsh, but I don't think so. Now, there is someone else on the scene who's probably also important to take note of and to be able to critically think through, is a gentleman called Paul Elam. Now, whilst the man advocates for genuine men's issues, his platform somehow channels anger rather than constructive dialogue. And so, in many respects, potentially alienates possible allies. It's this strong move almost on competition, confrontation, rather than collaboration that's missing in his work. Now we come to, I guess, one of the more recent superstars in the Manosphere, and that's our friend, not so friend, Andrew Tate. He is particularly well known for promoting a very rigid form of masculinity, one which, by and large, for most men actually turns out to be rather detrimental. His other bent is on financial success and physical prowess, and sees them potentially as the only measures of a man's worth, right? So it's how much you earn, own, and can manipulate, basically. Now, we all know that Mr. Tate has been in Romania under some serious charges and potentially will be found out for his criminal activities in exploiting women and girls and women, and also running a business model that's questionable. Okay, so what are some of the common misconceptions of the manosphere? Well, one prevalent idea that I've run across is that the manosphere is just about supporting men. I particularly get this from a lot of teenage boys who've gotten drawn into the murky depths, the murky corridors of this echo chamber. Well, parts of it do emphasise self-improvement, but it's at the expense of others. And the others are potentially mostly women, especially women who have a mind of their own, who exhibit independence and who strive for equality. Now, technically speaking, that should be all women, but we know that that's not necessarily the case. So I agree that men's issues, I'm very much on the forefront of that men's issues deserve attention, but we can do that, in fact, without undermining women's rights or concerns. In fact, in many respects, although I cannot, under any circumstance, profess to be a feminist as a male, I can profess to be an ally to the feminist cause. When feminism is about women's rights and equality to men. I'm not a patriarch. To me, men are not better than women, nor are alpha males, if there is such a beast, better than other males. So what do we do with this thing? Well, fundamentally, we need to get a handle on this because it's a rather large echo chamber, as I said before. So to all you men out there listening, and some of you have possibly been touched by the manosphere, think about what you profess. Think about your values. Think about what it is that you want in life, your experiences. And I want to encourage you to embrace a broader spectrum of masculinity. Seek out those spaces that support holistic self-improvement without demeaning others, and ones that don't focus on the shallow acquisitional and prestige-oriented factors in our culture. The whole overemphasis on competition. Fundamentally, human beings evolved on the back of collaboration, of cooperation, of working together. And I'm going to keep pushing that notion time and time again, because we have a geopolitical attitude that seems to run very strongly at the moment towards the thinking that might is right. Russia, the Ukraine. Russia wants the Ukraine space for whatever reason. So because it thinks it's bigger than the Ukraine, off it goes. It is an invasion of a democratic country that has its rights impinged on by this idea of domination, a colonialism, right? And we do that in many, many, many spaces. So there's lots of negative patterns in the manosphere. For example, the inclination to externalize blame. It's someone else's fault why I'm suffering. My message to you as men is simple. Don't blame others, take responsibility, be accountable, and make the necessary changes in the areas over which you do have influence over. It is not women's fault. In fact, the reality is that most of us men have very comfortable lives as a result of what women have contributed to our individual lives, but also in the community. Acknowledge that your feelings are important and need a constructive outlet, but are not more important than someone else's. Work with empathy. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. So in that context, we want to be able to achieve an ability to respect others, to include others, and to be distributive in our dealings. I had a conversation with someone recently, about what is true, brotherhood in a sense, or what does a true man do with his wealth? And my comment was, well, the best that he can do is to share it, to offer hospitality. If someone can't feed themselves, perhaps you can help. If someone needs a friend, perhaps that man is you. Think about others, not just yourself. We have a fundamentally narcissistic culture at the moment that has driven us into major mistakes, including allowing pollution to deteriorate the planet. And now we want to go and export our attitudes and our, shortcomings into the solar system. I see both sides. On the one hand, space exploration is a fundamentally important scientific and human endeavour as an extension, but surely we need to do that coming from the right headspace, not one of colonialisation, but one of exploration for all mankind. We're about to get into, mining the moon and Mars. Who's going to do that and for whom, and who's going to reap the benefits? I don't think it's going to be all of humanity. Somehow I think the 1 to 5% are going to reap all the benefits and the rest of us can get stuffed. So, final reflections. Okay, folks? Promote inclusivity, promote understanding, promote collaboration. And that fundamentally is the key to inspiring change. Not just in the manosphere, it's an echo chamber. The manosphere will disappear once we engage in the constructive values that I'm suggesting we buy into. Recognising problems in men's lives shouldn't come at the expense of others. Now, fortunately, gender dynamics are evolving. It's a struggle, but we're getting there. Now, the message to you guys out there is instead of resisting or decrying these changes, how about becoming a part of it, especially a proactive part of positive change? So get on board rather than, trying to scuttle the ship. So thank you for joining this particular podcast. Might have sounded a bit like a rave, but it's important. Now remember, as we inspire change, we have to do so with understanding and empathy. So until next time, this is me signing off. Now remember, episode 200 is coming up. It's just around the corner. And me and Dr. Mark Williams are going to have a particularly good rant for an hour and rave on his latest book, The Connected Species. And we're going to pick apart some of the aspects of his message in that book, of which I'm a wholehearted subscriber. So until next time, this is me signing off.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.